Welcome to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs, and their trials. I'm Dominic, the founder and owner of Elevate Business Coaching, a Boston-based business coaching and consulting firm that specializes in working with law firms and their lawyers to build, manage, and grow successful practices.
And I'm Bob Furlong. I'm a certified exit planner here at the Bullfinch Group. I help law firms create programs to attract and retain their best associates, and this creates a clear path for succession and retirement for senior partners.
So Missing Briefs, what's it all about? Well, it's about exploring and telling the compelling stories or briefs of lawyers who have experienced significant challenges and successes in the business of law. What was their gap? What were they missing? What do they wish that they'd known? Well, it's our pleasure today to welcome Irv. Irv Rakhlin is the founder and owner of Rakhlin Law, a criminal defense firm based in Natick, Massachusetts. He's received numerous awards and accolades as an attorney, including a 10.0 rating on AVVO and numerous consecutive selections as a super lawyer. But his biggest satisfaction comes from helping and improving the situation of his clients, those who are in crisis. Irv, how are you today?
Top of the afternoon to you, Dominic. Good to see you. Bob, great to see you as well.
Great to see you, Irv. Irv, you have an interesting story and work in a very specific area of the law. So let's get started by going back in time a little bit.
Sure.
So when was it that you came up with this bright idea to become an attorney? What brought it to mind, and when and why did you decide to be an attorney?
So, the legend goes like this, Bob. When I was since first grade, 6 years old, I was the negotiator in the class. If there was an issue with the teacher and a student, I was always inserting myself for better or worse in that discussion. I was always the one helping out with sort of smoothing the way. And, I think from that outset, I developed a real desire to listen to people and talk to people. And my mom told me that it was really around that age where I said I wanted to be a lawyer. Now, I wish she had dissuaded me, maybe. Who knows? I could have been a professional athlete or something. But in the end of the day, it's really that far back that I remember having that interest of interacting with people, learning about their problem, and trying to help with it.
I was just getting an image of how you negotiated or knocked it down from staying after school to just clapping the erasers. So
I got to start somewhere.
That's pretty cool. And so in criminal defense, why choose that area of the law as opposed to something else?
It's a very unique area. It's one of those areas that a lot of people are familiar with in the sense of we see it in our daily lives, right? We see things on the news that become criminal cases. We see things in all the various headlines. But for me, I don't know that I can't say from minute one that was my passion, but I knew in law school that I didn't like sitting at a desk. I didn't like just working on things that were theories. I really wanted to interact and have a difference in people's lives. And when I did the criminal defense clinic at Boston University, it put me into court. And right away, I had clients who were depending on me and looking for me to give them that guidance. And so that was when I really fell in love with it. I loved being in the action.
I love that. Didn't want to be dealing with theory all day, didn't want to be stuck behind a desk. You wanted to be where the action was, uh, making a difference in people's lives and not just, many lawyers do that, but they're really relying on you, right? In situations where the law's on their back, they're heavily relying on you, right?
I've had, Dominic, you're right. I've had everything from the most basic, literally a trespassing case, some young man swims in a quarry when he's not supposed to murder cases, right? Wow. And so you've had all of those. And I try to remind myself every time, even though I may have seen this situation before, it's probably the first time for this person, right? Yeah. And so they're coming to me with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and I try to do my best not to just placate them, right? I'm not just going to tell them what they want to hear, but to actually work with them to figure out, hey, is this a hair on fire moment, or is this a moment where we can strategize in a way that this doesn't have to be the end all be all problem?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so interesting. I could talk all day to you about criminal law and some of the stuff that you've done, but I want to switch gears just a little bit, and it's really around, there's there's the going to law school, knowing about the law and working with clients, but I'm going to switch a little bit to like the practice of law in terms of like the business of law. And I'm curious, you worked at a firm downstairs. You started your own firm. What were some of those key challenges when you started your own practice, hung up your own shingle, right? What were some of the key challenges that you
Well,
faced
if
when you
I'm
started
going to
out?
start, I got to be honest. I wasn't even my own shingle, Dominic. I
Yeah.
took my nameplate from my door at the old firm and I put it on the new door. I mean, I didn't have a lot, and I was,
Wow.
I just had to make do. And I started off with this idea. Um, I knew that when people were calling that old firm and asking for me, that I had achieved a position of where, hey, people rely on this guy and they can trust him. And if I set up my own phone number, I said, well, I bet they'd call that number, and that was really it. This is, if you can go back to the time, it was 2009. It was a rough time in the
Yeah.
economy. It was a scary time to jump out on your own, but I didn't have kids yet. And I
Yeah.
knew that if I was ever going to do it, I had to do it before then. And that's one of those things that I think young individuals coming up in law who are wanting to have families, they have to think about, because
Mhm.
there's two babies you raise, right? You raise your biological babies, and then you raise your business as a baby, right? And so when I gave birth to that business in 2009, it required a ton of care and attention. And I always thought to myself, try to keep overhead low.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have a fancy logo behind me. You guys are good with that. I don't do that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I wanted to provide a service. And it was interesting because I remember the biggest self-doubt I had was, well, there's a lot of other great criminal lawyers. In fact, I knew a lot of them as mentors, friends. So
Yeah.
why me? Why does the community need this? But I was amazed to find, and I guess it just holds true in a lot of businesses. If you provide a good service for a reasonable cost, people will come and find you because they'll hear about you. And so I'm really thankful that I had a lot of great mentorship that gave me some of the real business that I needed to know, because the business of law and the practice of law have nothing to do with one another. They're really different. I've seen lawyers that are wonderful lawyers and terrible business people, and
Mm,
vice versa. And
mm.
so I benefited from people that had come before me to give me that advice about how to do certain things and what not to do, right? Because I worked at a small firm and I saw what happened in some of those situations. So it is a big, big decision. That being said, there's never a perfect time. And if you're looking at jumping off into your own practice, that's the moment, right? That really is, because there's not going to be that moment that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for lawyers, they're always looking for a reason not to do it, right? Uh, as I like to call it, like erring. I'm not sure what to do, so I'm gonna just decide. I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna err on the side of inaction. How's
Yeah.
that? But for you, so you're. It's interesting what you said there. You said kind of 2009, before you had kids, you had the foresight to say like, if it's not going to be now, then when's it going to be? This is the time to take a leap. And you also mentioned there uh, about self-doubt. If I go out there, there's other people out there that do this, and some of them, are my role models, and I've learned from them, but also being able to balance that with the confidence of saying, hey, when people have called, they call looking for me. And if I continue to, build my reputation, do well by my clients, I can make a run of it.
Absolutely, Dominic. No, I think two things you said. One, the reputation. And that's the one thing I would say for young lawyers: never, ever compromise your reputation. Because if
Mhm.
you do it once, that will be the thing that people remember. And so I get, there's obvious reputational moments, and then there's the less obvious ones. Like, what do you do when somebody who's a former client calls you and says, hey, you're the best lawyer I know. I trust you implicitly. Now I got to get divorced, Irv. Can you help me with that?
Mhm.
Well, no,
Mm.
Irv doesn't do divorce work, right? That's not my area of expertise. And having the backbone and the confidence to say
Mhm.
to them, I know you trust me, but I need to give you to somebody else. That's something that comes, I think, with some age and experience. And I
Mhm.
think young lawyers, one of those traps is they fall into well, I'll just take this, I'll figure it
Mm.
out.
Mm.
This is not an area of the world to just figure things out in, especially criminal law. And when I see lawyers who come into the field who don't know what they're doing, it's painfully obvious. And as Bob said earlier, the consequences can be extremely painful. So it really is important to me to do the work that I do at the highest possible level, so that when I tell my client, look, there's things you have to worry about and I can't predict for you, but all the other ones, you're with the guy that can figure that out.
Yeah. So
You
kind
know,
of
I just
go
wanted to comment. We had an earlier guest that said when they started out, they were kind of more a threshold attorney. They took all the business game over the threshold. And I think that idea of you running a business and what kind of business do you want to be in, And specializing in an area of the law is a proper business as opposed to trying to be everything with to everybody. So we really give you a lot of credit for doing that because that's important.
It's a tough thing to do because when someone's ready to write you a check, a lot of people's eyes get big. But
Sure.
I try to remind myself, what is it that I can bring to this scenario, right? What is it that I can do? And if I can't honestly look myself in the mirror and say I'm the right person to help them, then I'd
Right.
rather them keep their money and
Mhm.
find that right person.
That's great.
Yeah. That old test of having to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know, the litmus
And that's an
test.
issue because most people, when they think of criminal defense attorneys, they think of this question like, well, how do you sleep at night? You represent these horrible people, right? I mean, let's be real. That's what people think. I
Right.
tell them this. I represent, for the most part, good people who had a bad moment.
Right.
These are people that find themselves in a situation that could be of their own doing. That
Mhm.
happens. It could be circumstantial. But whatever it is, I don't know. I genuinely believe that most people don't wake up in the morning with a desire to hurt someone or do something bad. Of course, there's some bad apples, right? That exists. But the overall general population doesn't feel that way. And I
Right.
think it's good. And that's a wonderful thing. But still they find themselves in problems. And most of my cases end, and I'm sort of I say this tongue in cheek, but it really does end this way, where the client says to me, I hope I never see you again. Thank you so much. And I get that. I understand I came into their life at a horrible time. I hopefully fix that problem, and then they never want to be there again.
That's a great way to look at it. Bob, Bob had a nice little chuckle at that, hoping I never see you again. But
Yeah.
I get that a lot. I get that a lot.
but that's because you are, it's like, if you call the 911 and the firefighters come out, they come out to your home, it's a bad situation, and you hope never to see them again, but you need them.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Critical, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
not dissimilar to the situation for some of your clients. But thinking back to the business side, right, of launching your own practice, and sure, you need to know the law, but you need to start to learn like the realities of being a business owner. What are some of the things that knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently?
That's a great question. They call it the practice of law because you're always learning, right? And so we're learning in the legal sense, but you're also learning as a business person. And for me, one thing, as I said, I did really well from the beginning is I kept overhead low. That was important. And that lesson has served me well. I think it's always great if we can live below our means, and that goes for our businesses too. I sometimes see colleagues who, like some money comes in and all of a sudden they're spending a lot more on advertising, a lot more on this, a lot more on that. And then when the money's not coming in, that's a problem. So it really is a thought that you got to have in advance.
Hmm.
I think for me, the other thing I would tell my past self would be not everything's as big a crisis as you think it is. That is
Mm.
one of those things that only comes maybe with age and some objectivity. But because people come to me always so upset, it was easy in the beginning of my career to mirror that in a way, right? To
Yeah.
take that on personally.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
while I think I'm very empathetic to their problems, you don't want your doctor crying during your surgery, right? So you don't want your criminal defense attorney nervous during your plea hearing. And so
Right.
you
Right.
do have to have an objectivity and a distance from it. But, there's a lot of clients that can tell you, I got a hug from Irv. Irv, helped me by the hand. He helped me out because it is tough. But you do have to remember, this isn't always as big a crisis as it seems. That was a big takeaway for me as I've gone along the business.
That's great. Well, so ultimately, there are going to be people that are going to need to meet you and avail themselves of your services. Hopefully, get in and get out, never have to see you again. But when they need to see you, we know that you'll be there for them. How do you like to be introduced to those prospective clients? What's the best if someone has a need or if someone has someone like even their own client that needs you? What's the best channel to connect you point A to point B?
So, I don't know if I'm old enough to be considered old school yet, but I'm verging on it. But I'll tell you, for me, the phone, I really, it's a lost art form, guys. People nowadays, especially younger than myself, are really hesitant to pick up a phone and call. They would rather text or send some type of message. I say this, one, you don't really want the prosecutor reading your text with your defense attorney ever out loud in court. So it's good to
Mm.
not put it in writing in general, right? Let's just keep that as a general principle. But really, I find that art of talking to someone is so important. I can hear what's important to them. I can hear the emotion in their voice. If I can see them face to face, that'd be great. But really, because things happen so urgently and without warning, a phone call is awesome. So I tell them, 617-564-0466. You call me and we can have a confidential conversation. And I'm always thrilled when I can tell someone you don't need me, right? This is going to be okay. You don't have this problem that you thought you have. But at the end of the day, in order to get a full understanding of what's going on, a phone call is best.
So old school phone call gets directly to you. You're a
There is no
thoughtful guy
receptionist.
and you'll figure it out.
I am the janitor, CEO, and receptionist all in one, guys.
That's great.
You're multi-talented, but
And multilingual. That's the other thing. I always
yes,
Yes,
talk
yes.
about.
Can you share with us? We forgot to mention that. What other languages do you speak, Irv?
I speak three. Two might be apparent by how I look. We got English, which I'm trying to do my best at right now. We've got Russian, я родился здесь, но я говорю по-русски, and we have Spanish, and that's the one that throws people because they don't expect, some pretty decent Spanish to come out of my mouth. Pero si hay una persona que necesita ayuda en español, puedo ayudarle. So, we've got them all. Sometimes people say they like to picture me putting on a sombrero and a Russian hat and a baseball cap and taking them all off. Whatever works, but I can help you in whatever language I can.
well, you,
Excepcional.
it's funny. I work a lot with lawyers, and there's always the thing about, I'm wearing so many different hats. I'm the owner, I'm the attorney, and this and that. But in your case, you got a whole other layer of complexity, which is the linguistic one, and that's impressive. Spanish and Russian, and I must say your English is very good.
Thank you. I appreciate
Coming
that.
from me.
Exactly,
There you
exactly.
go. But wow, that's impressive. Irv, it's been great having you join us today. If we had more time, there's lots more that I would love to delve into for sure with you. But I have loved just kind of hearing your story. Why criminal law, how you interact with your clients and the empathy that you bring to their situations. So I appreciate you coming with us. I appreciate the difficult field that you're working in. And I encourage people, if you know somebody who's got something going on, let's use that phrase,
Mm,
have
mm.
them reach out to Irv. And you've heard him say there, he's old school, the telephone.
The
Pick up the
telephone.
telly.
There you go.
It's really the best way to learn about something. And I want to say thank you to you guys for bringing to your audience, an opportunity to get a peek behind the covers. And we'll do an untold stories of criminal
Yeah.
defense another time.
Okay.
Look forward to it. So this has been Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs and their trials. If you've got an interesting story to tell about your own triumphs and trials of owning your own law firm, or perhaps you know somebody else that has such triumphs and trials, have them get in touch with us. I'm Dominic Grew.
And I'm Bob Furlong.
Until we meet again.